This is Stuck in the Cams, Ryan Peters, and I guess after today's news, I'm looking for a new truck team to root for. We'll talk about it next. Thanks for tuning in. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me here on this Wednesday afternoon. It has been a busy week so far with the news. We've got all kinds of stuff to talk about. We got Talladega, like that's not just a whole entire segment in itself. This coming weekend in the second round of the playoffs, I will be there. So I'm excited for that. If you're going to be there, let me know down in the comments below. But we have drivers moving organizations, we have teams moving and being sold out and moved on. So a ton of stuff to get to. But my first quick question so far is, who have you been impressed by to begin the playoffs? That is my question I'm asking you right now. Who is the driver so far as the playoffs have begun that you have been impressed by? And, that's kind of a difficult one for me, but I'm going to stick with what I've said all along, and it's going to be Bubba Wallace. I think Bubba Wallace has done the best that he has been able to do to advance so far. He had a chance to possibly win on Sunday, and I think he's got just as good a shot as anybody else to win this Sunday as well. Was actually in contention for the win during the spring race, where he ended up wrecking, trying to make a late block, a block that had no chance of being made, and he and his buddy Ryan Blaney ended up wrecking out of that. And the beneficiary was, well, a guy we're going to talk a lot about here in just a few minutes, in Kyle Busch. So that would be Bubba Wallace for me. My second would be Chris Buescher. I think he's got just a good chance to win this championship as anybody else. But so far, definitely, I think it's an easy one for me when it comes to Bubba Wallace. But let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to continue this conversation moving forward, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the channel. All you have to do is click on the subscribe button anytime we go live, which we do go live pretty often. Click on the bell, and you should be notified unless, well, the YouTube algorithm decides not to. If you're watching us on Rumble, you can do the same thing. Hit the Rumble button, click on the subscribe button, and let us know whatever you think your favorite driver is, and also be there for the lives as well. But now it is time to get into a jam-packed news session. All right. The first piece of news is that Sammy Smith will be replacing Josh Berry at Junior Motorsports. They went ahead and popped up a design here I'll bring up for you guys. So there is Sammy Smith in the Pilot Flying J number 8. He will be riding with JR next year. And, this is actually the second driver in the last 2 years to be poached from JGR to Junior Motorsports. Last year it was Brandon Jones, which, if you remember Martinsville last year, Ty Gibbs did all he could to make sure that Brandon Jones was not in the playoffs moving forward to the round of 4, the championship 4, and unceremoniously gave him the kick in the behind. And Brandon Jones, obviously, not too happy about that, said he couldn't wait to leave. Well, I don't think we've had anything from Sammy Smith saying that he's happy to leave JGR, but is another huge get for Junior Motorsports, a young, talented driver in Sammy Smith, switching over from Toyota to Chevy, and Chevy gathering more and more young assets. They already have Zane Smith moving over from Ford to Chevy. Now another Toyota driver moves over to Chevy. So another great get, both by JR Motorsport, Junior Motorsports, and for Chevy altogether. So, a nice piece of news there. Well, I guess the other piece of really big news that kind of took the world by storm yesterday, I think it slowly crept in, maybe from some not so credible sources, but I mean, here we are. Spire Motorsports, which we didn't talk a whole lot about this the other day because, well, it was kind of, I wouldn't say insignificant news, but news nonetheless, that they acquired Live Fast Motorsports and were the first team to buy a charter. The guess of that is around 40 to 50 million dollars. Um, I just thought it was just another move by Spire to get kind of like in the Rick Ware 3 race team business. And then the news came out that Zane Smith was going to be signed by Trackhouse. So I said, okay, so where's he going to go? Is Trackhouse going to buy a charter themselves? Well, then we got news that Trackhouse formed an alliance with Spire Motorsports, and he's actually going to drive for Spire. So the wheels start turning a little bit, and you're like, okay, so Spire making some news. Been invested by Gainbridge, as you can see that from the vehicles that they have. And then today, Spire Motorsports puts themselves squarely on the map by purchasing KBM, Kyle Busch Motorsports, the most successful truck series team in the circuit, 100 wins, 2 championships, ton of owner construction championships. At once, the fertile battlegrounds for Toyota and their up and coming drivers from the names of William Byron, Bubba Wallace, John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Jones, Christopher Bell. Tremendous talent started at KBM, worked their way up, and credit Kyle Busch as one of the beginnings of making great drivers. Toyota loses that partnership in a year, and then now KBM will be moving and selling all of its assets, not just the building, the chassis manufacturing, the CNC manufacturing, everything will be moving over to Spire. So Spire now will have 3 trucks, it will have 3 cars, and a technical alliance with Trackhouse Racing. So huge movement for Spire. And again, to me, out of nowhere, the only thing that I can think is the aggressiveness of Gainbridge really putting the money down and saying, we want to build something special. They have a foothold in the IndyCar series, and now they see an opening to be players in the NASCAR series. And being supported with Chevy, this is the biggest manufacturer out of Chevy, Toyota, and Ford that has been aggressive the entire time, whether it's acquiring young talent or acquiring other teams or building other teams from the bottom to now the top, the same way Chip Ganassi Racing was bought and built by Trackhouse. And we'll get a little bit more into the long term, but we do have a quote from Kyle Busch, and it's right here. He put this on his social media. When we started the truck series back in 2010, I never imagined that we'd be able to win 100 races with 18 different drivers, and that one day I'd be out racing in the Cup Series alongside so many of those drivers that I once mentored at KBM. I owe a lot of gratitude to so many people, starting with Samantha and my family, for believing in this dream that I had. It took countless hours by so many amazing people to make KBM the winningest team in Truck Series history. I will always appreciate everyone that walked through the doors and gave their all to make this such a successful organization. Not only has it been the people that were employed here, but also the families that supported them while they worked long hours and traveled on the weekend, sacrificing time at home and missing family events. And make sure you know, earmark that in your brain. And I certainly can't say enough thanks to Toyota for the first 13 years of support and to Chevy for stepping up to the plate this year. Due to their commitment that of our great sponsors, we've been able to compete at the highest levels and hang a lot of banners. I'm at a different point in my life now, and I was back in 2010. My family has grown, my Cup Series team has changed this year, and our son's racing schedule has become just as demanding as my own. It's important to me to be able to spend more time with family and my number 8 team at Richard Childress Racing. It'll be hard to walk away from the amazing facility that we have built. I'll be missing walking I'll miss walking on the shop floor, talking with our employees, hosting fan days in the lobby, and spending countless hours there ensuing its success. However, I know at this point in my life and in my career that this is the correct decision. So a very lengthy comment there by Kyle Busch. And for the short term, I want to talk about Kyle Busch and where he's at in his career. I think 2 years ago, where Kyle Busch was in terms of dealing with the changing landscape in NASCAR due to COVID, no practice time, one shot qualifying, all these different things. kind of put him behind the eight ball compared to what he's normally used to. And why do I start there? Because that's when the greatest change happened in NASCAR for what we know it today. It was simulator work really getting put in, remote work really getting put in, all these different things happening. And then, so his professional career takes a big change. And then his professional career takes probably the biggest change that nobody expected. And he moves over to RCR. So that changed his financial career. He was the highest paid driver in the sport. Joe Gibbs says we can't find a sponsor with Mars leaving, and you're going to have to go. And Kyle Busch said that, on quote, there are going to have to be lifestyle changes. I think at that point, when Kyle Busch realized he was not going to be at Joe Gibbs anymore, he made a complete and drastic change in his mindset, and he's been a totally different person from that experience. I don't know if it's going to help Kyle Busch, the driver, but I think Kyle Busch, the man, has had I wouldn't say a reality check, but a midlife alteration to where no longer is the motorsport that he does his number one the number one thing that he is focused on. I think he's just as focused on Brexton's career. I think he's just as focused on his daughter and going through the stuff that he's had with his family and such the hardships that they've had of getting pregnant. And now that Lennox is here, ensuing that she has a future. And you can talk money and what's it take for people to be financially stable. That's none of my business. But I'm just saying, from what we've seen from Kyle Busch, he has had a complete change of the man that he is and the way that he, walks around. I mean, Kyle Larson even said the other day that he's now the nice guy. And I think that's because the weight of that he has put on himself is no longer there. I think that Kyle wants to win on Sundays. He wants to be the best driver in the sport, but it does not consume him the way that it did before. He has other things in his life that matter just as much, or if not more. We know that Kyle Busch is one of the greatest drivers of all times. He has nothing to prove when it comes to that. But now you are seeing the precipitation of a change for Kyle to go, where I was going in my life and where I am now in my life has come to a fork. And I don't know if I can be the Kyle Busch that beats Earnhardt's record, that wins almost 100 NASCAR Cup Series races. So therefore, I'm now going to focus more on my family, what I can do to ensure that they have a bright future. And we've heard him talk about that. And that's kind of the confusing thing about this, is because he laid out a detailed plan, because Kyle Busch is a smart person and looks at the future of things and says, I want to race with Brexton. We'll share a ride. And then after he's fully able to share a ride with me, he'll try to win a Truck Series championship. And that's the way he's going to go out. So I'm guessing this was a way to solidify his financial future, and probably now has a walkway into the future of motorsports where he can be home at times and say, Spire, when Brexton's of age, he's going to have a Truck Series ride. And RCR, whenever he becomes of age, he's going to have a Cup Series ride. I fully believe that's what's happened with Kyle looking to the future and relieving the pressure on himself and saying, I'm fully invested now into my son and my daughter and my family and everybody else. Will that be best for Kyle, the race car driver of the 8 car? No. And I think that's a fair comment to say, because we've seen it on track. I've seen Kyle Busch make more mistakes this year than I've ever seen in my entire life. Actually, over the last 3 years. And I'm okay with that. It sucks at the time, but it seems like Kyle, the person, is much happier. The only thing that I would say from a long term statement is Kyle Busch is still very much needed in this sport. He said it himself. He's mentored a ton of guys that he races with on Sundays. That should not be taken for granted. The same way that Junior Motorsports and Dale Jr. still has a foothold in the NASCAR Cup Series, whether it's being a commentator, an owner of an Xfinity Series team, or a podcaster. He still does a lot for this sport. Kyle Busch still needs to have an influence in this sport. His brother has an influence in this sport now and a voice. And Kyle Busch does need to do the same thing. If the sport wants to be what it has been in terms of greatness and will be by having his mentorship and his brain of being one of the best drivers in it ever. Now, to move towards Spire, what is the future outlook at Spire? To me, this is a rocket ship that they have seen. RFK and Trackhouse have laid out the blueprint of how you can become a nothing to something in a matter of 2 years. And I think they see that and say, this is the time to strike now. Strike while the iron's hot. There's a chance to buy a charter. We didn't think that was going to be possible because charters haven't been bought. So now that we're in with buying a charter, let's go ahead. Kyle Busch, let's give him an offer he can't refuse. He sets up his future, will be a part of his son's future. I mean, you think about it now. Think about what Kyle Busch is looking at when it comes to RCR and when it comes to Spire. This could be a majority stake to where Kyle then purchases later on when he's out of NASCAR altogether a stake of ownership in a Cup Series team. To me, that would be the best because then I could root on Kyle Busch / Spire Motorsports and Brexton Busch. I'm saying that from a selfish rowdy fan myself. He gets out of it now, gets to be with his family, and when his son's old enough down the line, he gets to be a part of it then as well, and still has a voice on how to make really, really good race cars and really good race teams. We've se- we've seen what Kyle Busch can do when he's at the helm, both with a steering wheel and with a pen and paper when it comes to running an organization. He's a winner. Does Spire take part of that and listen to that as well, starting with what they are now? I think so. I think Kyle Busch will have a hand. RCR Richard Childress ain't getting any younger. Spire Motorsports has never been able to succeed. This is a blueprint to me for both these people to shake hands and go, we have a future invested into each other together. You're going to bear the financial burden of it while I stay with my family. I'll bring my brains and my hard work and things of that in the future whenever it comes that time. I think that's a strong, strong possibility. Cannot confirm that. That's just me thinking. But Spire Motorsports right now with the backing of Gamebridge has done something that I think absolutely will be a winner. And this is something interesting from NASCAR. I mean, RFK has had a sponsorship or an alliance, if you will, with Rick Ware Racing. And now we're seeing Spire with an alliance. Sorry, the words are escaping my brain. I'm just so thinking about this all together. We've seen Spire now run an alliance with Trackhouse. This is good. These teams that are at the bottom are doing things to help grow to be more competitive. And the more competitive the bottom is, the more competitive the middle will have to be, and the more competitive the top will have to be. And that makes a better racing product altogether. Anybody on any given Sunday right now can win. We've seen that. We've seen Eric Jones in the last few weeks go from absolute dog shit to running in the top 5 here in the playoffs. It's that much. It's that close. That's how close these cars are. That's how close a lot of these drivers are. Now, if they're all on the same playing field, they all need the same assets to compete. And we're seeing people step up to the plate to do that. And if it wasn't for Trackhouse being the lead, and if it wasn't for Brad Keselowski, a successful driver, buying an ownership stake in Roush Fenway Racing, I don't think we see that type of movement. They've really led the charge. So the next question, Chevy, can they be stopped? Can Chevy be stopped right now? That is, I don't know. I mean, we look at The other big piece of news this week from Ford was they re-signed Ryan Preece. If you're a Ryan Preece fan, I'm sure that makes you happy. Josh Berry, Ryan Preece, there's your signatures. John Hunter Nemechek, he moves up to the Cup Series for Toyota and Legacy Motor Club next year. Chevy's out here buying other institutes, and their teams are getting bigger and they're getting stronger. They're signing international talent. They're signing Zane Smith, taking him away. They already took Kyle Busch away, the all-time leading Toyota driver, to put him in a Chevy ride. He immediately wins 3 races this year. Chevy is playing for keeps. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Zane Smith in the 48 if Alex Bowman doesn't keep it up. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And if you're Rick Hendrick, you look at these other teams below you right now and going, they're not that far off. And if you're the other manufacturers, you go, holy cow, we better do something about this and step our game up. Carson Hocevar's next. I feel like he has to be the big splash that one of these teams has to make. Where? I don't know. I mean, the easiest call would be Ford. The easiest call would be Ford to say, all right, he's going to Stewart Haas. All right, he's going to Penske. Somebody has to do something because you lose Hocevar too. I mean, I know this is in the future, which we're not promised tomorrow, but I mean, hell, what if Brexton Busch becomes the next best prospect and Toyota pissed that down the drain? Who's going to develop these Ford and Toyota drivers with even losing all these assets to Chevy? I don't know. You got Kyle Busch, you got Dale Earnhardt Jr., you got other investments from the outside, Gainbridge, Trackhouse, and all their type of investments. It's not just domestic, it's international now. Somebody better step up to the plate. So now, this is going to be a longer episode, in case you guys are wondering. We'll get to the preview as we go to Talladega. All right. So we are moving to Talladega, which typically you can do a whole show on the chaos that's going to happen at Talladega. But this week, it was just way too much. So we had to get to everything, and had a lot of views and thoughts upon the other stuff as well. So again, I asked if you ever want to support this channel, Rumble button, subscribe button. They'll be at the end. A Patreon if you ever feel like donating. Never ask for any of your pennies. I'd rather have your free eyeballs if you want to help this channel grow and create a community here at Stuck in the Catch Fence. So there's my plea, if you will, to use my millennial. Smash the like, subscribe, or share button, comment below, all the other bullshit. You don't have to do any of it. As long as you're watching and you're enjoying yourself, that's all I can ask for anyway. But we are moving to Talladega and talking about being entertained. I'm hoping that Talladega and the drivers there saw Daytona for the Coke Zero 400 and go, we can go 3-wide racing. I went to Talladega last year, was a little bit disappointed. I mean, it was cool. Don't get me wrong. It was cool, but the next gen car was not running nearly as what I saw at Atlanta earlier that year. And I think with some of the things that have been changed, some of the drivers changing their mindsets, I think Talladega might be an amazing race if they go 3-wide. There's much more room. Hell, you can go 4-wide comfortably at Dega compared to Daytona. And if they take on that same mindset, then we will have a tremendous race and we will have accidents. And not to say that accidents make great racing, but when you're going 3-wide, you're going to make mistakes. So if we're going to get true restrictor plate style racing, then bring it on. I'm all for it. I don't want to see one line riding along the top, none of that crap. Give us the good racing that, this support's supposed to be there for and what Talladega fans and NASCAR fans deserve to see. That being said, who are the teams that I'm looking at? Well, I think it's easy to go with Roush Fenway. Keselowski Racing. So I'm looking at both Buescher and Keselowski. I'm telling you, it feels like Keselowski is on the verge of winning a race, and I don't see why not this week. So I'll go there. Again, got to go with Bubba Wallace. He does well at Talladega. So there's three of my drivers. I'm also, call me a homer. It could have been a lot worse for Kyle Busch. Could have been a lot worse than 17 points. He's got to get stage points. He can make that up in 2 stages. So I want to see an aggressive Kyle Busch try to lead some of this race. He won it in the spring. Because I'm going, there's no way in hell he wins. So he'll probably wreck out in the first lap. But I want to say that Kyle Busch is going to have a renewed sense. Really only now has to focus on his Cup Series career along with his family. Does not have to worry about anything else anymore. So focus purely on the playoffs with Kyle Busch. And then after that is kind of a wild card on who do you think will do well. But a guy that I think has been a pretender instead of a contender who really, really, really needs a good race for me to move past the thought that, his pit crew's made some good adjustments and changes versus his actual speed is Ross Chastain. And I think that, he and his crew chief have made tremendous calls, but the speed has not been there. But this is a way for them to steal a win and get themselves into the next round where they don't have to have speed. So I'm going to go with Ross Chastain. In the comments below, let me know what your 5 drivers are, and we'll see how well we stack against each other. But again, if you want to support the show, this is the best way to do it. We are on Facebook at Stuck in the Catch Fence. We are on Patreon, and we are also on Rumble as well if you don't want to do YouTube. So, again, a long show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully, it's a fun race for you guys on Sunday with Talladega, and there will not be a post-race show because I will be there. So we'll try to get to that maybe on Monday or Tuesday early next week. Possibly have a guest coming on here soon if you're tired of listening to just my voice as well. But that's going to do it for here. Thank you again, everyone. Love you all. And God bless. We'll see you in the next video.